Hello class. Today we're going to talk about subtracting integers. So if you remember on Friday we talked about addition. So today we're going to talk about subtraction. So today you're going to need your Chromebook, your daily notebook, and your pencil or your pen. Okay, let me switch screens so you can see a little bit more. Okay, so let's talk about setting up our notebook again. If you remember correctly, let me turn on my little camera here so you can see me. So if you remember correctly, I told you for your daily notebook what I want you to do every single day is you start off by writing the date. So please write down the date. Okay, so today's date is 8/31/20. You might want to put, you can put Monday on there if you want to. It's up to you. Okay, and then we're going to write down the objective. And today's objective is subtract, and you can abbreviate that, just SUBT, subtract integers. Okay, so that's what we're going to be doing today. Okay. So let's review what we talked about the other day, okay, on Friday. Okay, so you'll see in the objective here it says adding and subtracting. So we're going to review addition first, and then we're going to go into subtraction. So let's first talk about integers though. Okay, the definition of integers is nothing but the set of whole numbers and their opposites, and we've been talking about that quite a bit. So when we're dealing with integers, we're not dealing with any decimal numbers or fractional pieces or anything like that. We're just dealing with nice pretty numbers. It's just we are dealing with the positives and the negatives. And the negatives are our opposites. So we've got our whole numbers, like in this particular thing right here. You've got, let's say we had that number 4 right there. Well, its opposite then is going to be on the other side of 0, the same distance away. So this first 4, the positive 4, is 4 places to the right of 0. And the negative 4 is 4 places to the left of 0. And that's what we're talking about by opposite. So we need to remember that. It becomes very, very important when we're talking about integers to understand that idea. We've talked about examples of integers, and we saw on that previous slide several examples. So we've got all the positive numbers and the negative numbers, and 0 is also an integer. It's just 0 is the only number that doesn't have an opposite. Okay. So let's review what we talked about with integers. And we talked about adding integers two different ways. We talked about adding with integer chips, which is the 2-color counters right here. Or we also talked about adding them with a number line. And we're going to talk about both of those real quick. So let's look at this first problem right here, the 5 plus 3. So if you remember what that meant I had 5 positives, and then I had 3 more positives that I'm going to add to that, because that's what the add means, to put together. So if we were to add all those up, we would end up with a positive 8. Now the same thing happens if we have negatives, like in this next problem, where we've got 3 negatives, and then I've got 4 more negatives. What do I have all together? Well, I have 7 negatives. Now, what's really important to understand is what happens when I have both positives and negatives. So here I've got negative 5, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then I've got 7 positives. Now we know that anytime a positive or a negative get together, they make a 0. Okay, so they cross each other out. So in this particular one, we've got 5 sets of positive negatives that cross each other out. So what do I have left? I only have 2 positives, which is our answer. Okay, so that kind of brings us to those rules that we talked about, and we'll review those in just a second. Okay, so we're going to skip the next problem just for a second. We'll talk about it in a minute. Now, we also looked at this in terms of a number line, and in a number line, we're talking about directions. So if I wanted to do 5 plus 3 using a number line, that means that I'm going to start here at 0, and I'm going to go, since it's a positive 5, I'm going to go right 5. So I go right 5, and then it says I'm going to go right 3 more, because it says positive 3. So I go out 3 more, and where do I end up at? I ended up at 8. Same exact answer. Okay, the same thing happens when we deal with the negatives. Oops. Same thing happens when we deal with the negatives. Okay, so we start with a 0 there. Okay, and we're going to go left 3 this time because it says negative 3. And then I'm going to go left 4 more. And where did I end up at? I ended up at a negative 7. Okay, now what if, I'm trying to use my eraser and I keep hitting the wrong thing. Okay, now what if we had positives and negatives, like this negative 5 plus positive 7? Well, the negative 5 says I'm going to start here at 0 and I'm going to go left 5. Well, the positive 7 says I'm going to turn around and I'm going to go from where I'm at right now 7 places. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And where did I end up at? I ended up at a positive 2. So it doesn't really matter which way you do these questions. You just got to remember that addition means that I'm putting things together, okay, or I'm going in directions and I'm adding those directions together. So that's the really important thing to understand about addition, okay, which brings us to our rules. So what's the procedure for adding integers? Well, as we talked on Friday, it says if our signs are alike, in other words, I've got a positive number and a positive number, or I've got a negative number and a negative number, you're going to add your numbers together and keep the sign of the problem. So if I've got positives and positives, then we're going to add together and make more positives. If I've got negatives and negatives, I'm going to add together to make more negatives. Now the problem arises when we have signs that are different, and that's what we got to remember. So it says if your signs are different, okay, that's the key part. If your signs are different, you're going to subtract your numbers, okay, because our one positive and one negative zap each other out. So we're taking those out of the problem. That's our subtraction. And then you take the sign of the number with the greatest absolute value. So if we remember that absolute value, we're talking about the distance a number is from 0. So if we look at this first problem, negative 4 plus 6, okay, our signs are different, so that means we're going to subtract. Okay, so 6 take away 4 gives us 2. So you take the bigger looking number and you subtract the smaller looking number from it. Or you take the greater absolute value, which is our 6, because absolute value is how far is that number from 0. This one is 6 places away, and this negative 4 is 4 places away. So the one that has the greatest absolute value is 6. So you take the greater absolute value number and you subtract the other number from it. 6 take away 4 gives us 2. Now which one of these had the greater absolute value? The 6 did, so that's why it's a positive 2. Okay, in this other question, we've got 5 plus negative 9. Okay, so the absolute value of 5 is 5. The absolute value of negative 9 is 9. So we're going to take the greater absolute value, the 9, subtract the 5 from it. 9 take away 5 is 4. Now again, which one had the greater absolute value? Whichever number you put first. And that's the sign we took. And that's the reason why this is a negative 4. Okay, so that's reviewing addition. So now let's talk about subtraction. Subtraction is what we need to focus on today. Okay, so here we go. Now, in addition, we know that addition means to add to, okay, to put together. Okay, now subtraction, it doesn't mean that. Subtraction means to take away. Okay, so in this first one here, we've got 7 take away 3, or 7 minus 3. So if I were to build this with our 2-color counters, like down here on the bottom, okay, what this says is I've got 7 positives, and I'm going to take away 3 of them. So can I do that in this problem? Yes, I can come up here, I can take away this positive, I can take away this positive, I can take away that positive. So I took away 3 of them. What do I have left? I end up with 4. Okay, that one's simple, easy. Okay, now with negatives, it works the same way. So in this question, I've got 6 negatives, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I need to take away 3 of those. So 1, 2, 3. So I took away those 3. What do I have left? I end up with 3 negatives. Perfect. Okay. Now, what about this next question here? Okay, this next question says I've got 7 positives. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. But it says I need to take away 4 negatives. Well, I don't have any negatives to take away. So I'm kind of in a quandary. Okay, I'm not quite sure how to do this. Okay, so, well, there is one number that I can put into a problem that will never change its value, and that's the value of 0. Okay, now what does a 0 look like? Well, a 0 looks like 1 positive and 1 negative. So what if I added a positive and a negative to this problem? Will it change its value? No. What if I added another one? No. What if I added another one? Doesn't change its value. What if I added another one? Doesn't change its value any. But what you do notice, I hope, is that by adding those zeros into the problem, I now have some negatives in my problem. So when this problem says 7 take away 4 negatives, I can actually now take away 4 negatives. And what do I end up with? Okay, well, the first part of this question right here is 7 take away negative 4. Well, I just did that. And what do I have left? Well, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 positives. I end up with 11 positives there, okay? And then I've got to take away, to finish out the problem, take away 5 positives. So could I take away 5 positives? Of course I could. There's my 5 positives I took away. What did I end up with? I ended up with a positive 6 as my answer. So what we have to understand about subtraction is sometimes we've got to add something into the problem in order to make it work, okay? So that brings us to a rule, okay? And the rule that we have is really kind of interesting, okay? So this is our rule, and then we're going to go back and work a few more questions. It says, what is the procedure for subtracting integers? Well, what we're going to do, and what I hope you've remembered that we're going to do, is that we're going to change the subtraction sign to an addition sign, and then we're going to change the next number to its opposite. And then we're going to go back to an addition problem. Then we go back to those add rules. So if I were to go back and look at several questions here, so let's just kind of look at a few of them. Let's say we had 4 take away 7. So if I had 4 positives, could I take away 7 positives? No, I can't. So if I had 4 positives here, I do not have 7 positives I can take away. But again, if I were to add zeros into my problem, I might be able to still take it away. So if I were to add a 0 into the problem, and then add another 0 into the problem, and add another 0 into the problem, what you'll notice is I now have 7 positives I could take away. So if I took those positives away, I ended up with a -3 as an answer. So now if we were to look at our rule, and our rule says in this next page right here, let me go back up to that page again. It says the procedure for subtraction, we're going to change the subtraction sign to an addition sign. So if I were to come back up, no, I went too far. If I were to change this subtraction sign to an addition sign, let me change my color real quick. What if I were to change this subtraction sign to an addition sign and the 7 to its opposite, which is what our rule says to do? Change the subtraction sign to addition sign, and then change the next number to its opposite. We now have an addition problem. Okay, so if we were to think about that and try to do that as an addition problem, okay, what do we do? Okay, well, if we go back to those rules, if our signs are different, what are we going to do? We're going to subtract our numbers. Now that's not a subtraction problem, we're going to subtract our numbers, because now I can actually build this one. Okay, so if I were to build this problem, I've got 4 positives, and then I need to add to it 7 negatives. Okay, so now, every time I've got a positive and negative, they zap each other out, and what am I left with? I'm left with 3 negatives. Okay, so the rule in subtraction is I'm going to change this subtraction sign to addition, and whatever that next number is, I'm going to change it to its opposite. Okay, so let's see if we can do a couple more questions real quick to make sure we understand what we're doing. Okay, so here we go. Here's the next problem. What if I were to give you -3 minus 5? Okay, so our rule says change subtraction to addition. So I'm going to leave this first number alone. I'm not going to mess with it. I'm going to change my subtraction sign to an addition sign. And then my very next number, whatever it is, I'm going to change it to its opposite. And then that first problem now goes away, and I now have this new problem. Okay, so in this new problem, we've got 3 negatives plus 5 negatives. So if I were to build that, negative, 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 what do I end up with? -8. And that's our rule. Okay, so let me try one more. Okay. And then we're going to work a hard one. Okay, so here's the next question. What if I give you this one? What if I give you -6 minus -8? Okay, so this one says I've got 6 negatives and I'm going to take away 8 negatives. Could I do that? No, I can't. Okay, so we use the rule. Okay, and this time I'm going to do it right on the problem itself. Okay, which is probably what most of you will do. So I'm going to leave this -6 alone. I'm not going to mess with it. I'm going to change this subtraction sign to addition. And whatever this next number is, I'm going to change it to its opposite. And then I'm going to fall back on my addition rules. And those addition rules are, if my signs are alike, add them and keep the sign. If my signs are different, subtract them and take the sign of the number with the greatest absolute value. So in this one, I'm going to do 8 take away 6, which gives you 2. Okay. And then who's got the greater absolute value? Which number is farthest from 0? The 8. So it's a positive 2. Okay. And that's how we do subtraction. So again, the rule. Pause the video and write this rule down on your paper. Okay. Change the subtraction sign to an addition sign, and then change the next number to its opposite. So here was the original problem, 9 minus negative 4. So we left the first number alone. We changed the subtraction sign to an addition sign. And the very next number, whatever it was, we changed it to its opposite. So this first number was negative, and it's now positive. And then we go back to our addition rules. Okay, that's what we do with subtraction. So what I'd like for you to do, okay, I want you to practice just a little bit. Now this is kind of a little bit of both types of questions, addition and subtraction, because it's one of those kinds of things. You can't do a subtraction problem unless you can do an addition problem. Okay, so I want you to pause the video, and I want you to answer these 4 questions, and then we'll come back and work them together. Okay, so let's see how you did. So the first thing you do in any problem is you've got to determine what kind of a problem is it. Is it addition or is it subtraction? So in this first one is addition. Okay, so we like addition. So we're going to, signs alike add, signs different subtract. So in this one, I've got a positive 45 and a negative 36. So my signs are different. So that means I'm going to subtract those numbers. Now if the numbers are too big, just write it out again and do the subtraction. So I can't do 5 take away 6, so I come over and borrow from the 4. And so I end up with 15 take away 6, which is 9. And then 3 take away 3 is 0, so I end up with 9. Now which one of these numbers has more? Which one has the greater absolute value? The 45, so that's why it's a positive 9. I don't know what that was. Okay, that's why it's a positive 9. Okay, the second question is going to be this one over here. Go to negative 52, take away negative 16. Okay, so even though, yes, I could do that, I'm still going to use the rule. And my rule is leave the first number alone, change subtraction to addition, and the next number to its opposite. So now what am I going to do with my numbers? My signs are now different, so I'm going to subtract my numbers. So I come over to the side and I do 52, take away 16. Well, 2 take away 6, I can't do that, so I borrow from the 5. So I end up with 12 take away 6 to get 6. 4 take away 1 to get 3. So I end up with a 36. But what kind of a 36 will that be? I've got an absolute value of negative 52 is 52, and an absolute value of 16 is 16. So which one has the greater absolute value? The negative 52, so it's a negative 36. Now what if we have a whole string of numbers? Well, then what we're going to do is we're going to, and I'm going to change the color of my pen real quick so you can see this a little bit better. Okay, I'm going to leave my first number alone, and I'm going to change subtraction to addition, next number to its opposite. Then I'm going to change subtraction to addition, next number to its opposite. Then I'm going to change subtraction to addition, next number to its opposite. And then what we're going to do is we're going to put like things together. Okay, so my negative 7 here, it has a negative 8 that can go with it. So if I were to take the 8 and the 17, or the 8 and the 7 and put those together, I would end up with negative 15. So now my 12 and my 14 are both positive, so I can put those together. So 12 plus 14 gives me 26. And then I do one last addition problem. Okay, so 15 plus 26, my signs are different, so I'm going to subtract. So I'm going to take the larger one, 26, and subtract 15 from that. So let's see, 6 take away 5 is 1, 2 take away 1 is 1, and who has more? The 26, so it's a positive 11. Okay, one last question. Now this one, we start off with a good number, 18. Then I've got a plus 4, but I see that there's a minus. So I'm going to automatically change my minus to plus, next number to its opposite. Then we'll take this next minus here, and we'll change it to addition, and that 13 is going to turn into a positive. Now I go through and put all my like things together. I've got 18 and 4 and 13. Those are all likes. Okay, those are all positives. So 18 and 4 make 22 plus 13. Let's see, 22, 32 plus 3 more gives me 35 plus negative 8. Okay, now my signs are different, so I do one subtraction problem. So I've got 35 take away 8, okay, because if my signs are different, I subtract, and I end up with 27. Now, who's got more? The 35 does, so it's a positive 27. And anytime you have a positive number, you do not have to have the plus sign, because if it doesn't have a sign, we automatically assume that it's positive. So again, what are our procedures? For addition, because you know every question, if it's subtraction, you're going to change it to an addition problem. So if it's addition, if my signs are alike, then I add my numbers and keep the sign of the problem. If my signs are different, in other words, I've got an addition problem, but one's positive, one's negative, I'm going to subtract my numbers and take the sign of the number with the greatest absolute value. Now, if it is a subtraction problem, then the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to change the subtraction sign to an addition sign anywhere we see it, and the very next number, whatever that happens to be, we're going to change it to its opposite. And then once we do that, we go back to our addition rules. Signs alike add, signs different subtract. Okay, so that's what I'm going to have you do on your assignment today. Okay, so just like on Friday, I gave you a form to fill out, you're going to do the same thing with subtraction. So let's talk about that real quick. So let me switch my screen real quick so that you can see what's on the form. So this form looks exactly like the one that we did on Friday. Let me see if I can make it a little bit bigger so you can see it a little bit better. There we go. Now it's a little bit bigger. You'll notice the instructions are exactly the same. Put your first name in, last name, select your period. But this time we've got subtraction problems instead of addition problems. So the first 12 questions are just simple little subtraction problems. No big deal. Just put in your answer. Okay. Okay, and then we get down to the word problem. Now, many of you last week, you didn't watch the video whenever I explained the question. So let me explain this one. This one's kind of a tricky one also. Question 13 says the highest and lowest recorded temperatures for the state of Texas are 120 degrees Fahrenheit and negative 23 degrees Fahrenheit. What is the difference in these extreme temperatures? Now, anytime you're finding differences in temperatures, there's always one way to do it. And the way you do this is you always take the hot temperature minus the low temperature anytime you're trying to find difference. Okay, so what we need to remember about this when you're dealing with temperatures, so let me move back to a kind of a blank page over on my screen, and we'll kind of talk about this one just for a second. So let me turn off my display. So in this one right here, what we've got to understand when we're dealing with temperatures, you're dealing with a thermometer, okay? And that thermometer, if you were to kind of look at it, it's like a number line. It's exactly like a number line. It's just most of the time that number line is up and down when we're talking about a thermometer. But it's the same kind of thing, okay? So we've got a 0. And in this particular problem, we've got a 120 degree and we've got a negative 23 degree. And I'm trying to find the difference between those. Or in other words, difference means the distance between them. Well, if you think about it, if I'm going from 120 back to 0, that's 120 degrees. But then I've also got to go 23 more because I go to the other side of 0 because that number is negative. So when you're looking at that particular question, the highest and lowest recorded temperatures for the state of Texas are 120 and negative 23. What's the difference or what's the distance between these two extreme temperatures? So you always take hot minus cold. Okay, and then all I want you to do right here in this answer spot is put the number for the temperature. Do not try to put degrees Fahrenheit because it just doesn't work. Okay, just put a number and that will be sufficient. Now when we're finding the difference here between temperatures, it's always going to be a positive number, so keep that in mind when you're doing this. Now I realize this video is a little long, okay, but I really need you watching the videos, okay, to make sure that you actually understand. Okay, so this week we are going to be doing a test. Okay, so once we kind of get finished with subtraction, we're going to hit multiply and divide. That's going to be tomorrow's lesson. Then we're going to do a test review and a test on Wednesday and Thursday. Okay, so kind of keep that in mind. Okay, so until next time, I'll see you then.